On This is Manitoba today, we are going to talk about things affecting Manitobans and Winnipeggers that are happening here, but also that are happening abroad. I'm Marcy Markusa. Thanks for joining us. So the things happening here. The mayor of the city of Winnipeg will be on the podcast today talking about the city's role in the housing strategy that you may have heard us discussing before on the podcast. Brand new, huge strategy to get people into homes. But we're beginning with talking about what is happening in the Middle East, because as of this moment that I'm speaking, January 16th, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal has been put on hold. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Hamas reneged on parts of the original document and needs to back down, and Hamas says that it is abiding by the agreement. So after 15 months, there is still hope on the horizon. So let's talk to two Manitobans about that, starting with Emily Kalo. She's an Israeli-born citizen living in Winnipeg. She's a student at the University of Manitoba, and she lost one of her friends on October 7th. That is the day that Hamas militants attacked southern Israel. Well, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what were you thinking yesterday? Obviously, we have a stall this morning, but as I mentioned, still hope. What went through your mind when you were hearing the news that the ceasefire is close?
It was such a feeling of relief, I think, for so many of us, for anyone who's driven by on Sundays by Superstore on Kenniston. You've heard the Jewish community here locally, but also internationally really, chant this mantra of bring them home. It's always been about the hostages. Everything has been about bringing our hostages home. So to see that there's actually an opportunity to end the torture and suffering of these families who haven't seen proof of life of their loved ones, who don't know what's happening to their loved ones, who haven't seen their loved ones in 467 days, to know that there is hope for them, that they will get to reunite either with their loved ones alive or at least get, a proper, respectful burial for their loved ones. It's a different type of relief. I think the whole community is really just cautiously optimistic that we'll get to see that happen in the next few days.
Have you been in contact with any family back home about, what they're saying about this?
Absolutely. And this has been the chance within Israel for the government to come to a deal, for there to be a ceasefire and to bring the hostages home. It has been loud. You can see those protests since the start of the war, really. So I think so many of them, everyone in Israel knows someone who is being held hostage or knows someone whose friend or family member is. It's such a small-knit community. So I think, again, it's really just this optimism that this is the beginning of the end. 33 hostages are supposed to be released in phase one, so that can't be the end. We will have to make sure that this actually goes through and all phases are met. But if that's the case, I think everyone will just be filled with relief.
I mentioned you lost a friend on October 7th. How are you feeling and how are you thinking of your friend today?
His legacy is something that I think of every day, but especially seeing the names of who's included in the 33 to be released in phase one. It's not lost on me that these are people that were at the Nova Festival, just like my friend. In the hours of October 7th, the beginning hours, we weren't sure where he was, if he was one of the hostages, if he was alive or not. And obviously we were met with tragic news, but to know that these people being held hostage are no different than him. Some are even younger than him. There's even, babies being held hostage, a 2-year-old. So I think it's not lost on me, the gravity of the situation, and knowing how much his family has gone through, to know that other families will get to reunite with their loved ones. It's quite significant.
Do you want to speak his name? Just because sometimes, obviously, I want to give people space to really remember those that they've lost.
Absolutely. His name was Ben Mizrahi.
What questions do you still have, Emily, about this agreement?
I have a lot of questions. First and foremost, this agreement is almost identical to one proposed in May that Israel agreed to, that was not agreed to by Hamas. And we know the cost of that, not only the Palestinian lives lost since then, but also we know that the hostages were killed as retaliation in between then. Parents like Hirsch Goldberg Poland's parents, Rachel Goldberg Poland, who lost their son, whose son was murdered since then. So I have a lot of questions about why there wasn't more international pressure for Hamas to agree to the same deal then and to hopefully end this earlier, but also questions about what's the long-term plan for this? How are we going to rebuild Gaza for the Palestinian people? But also, how are we going to reconcile with the fact that the Israeli community and the Palestinian community alike are going to be traumatized from this, are traumatized? There's going to be intergenerational effects of this. So I'm curious to see the long-term plan about how we can really make sure that this isn't just a short-term solution, but actually bring some long-term peace to the region.
Yeah, as people, you're right to raise that this is a step and one obviously that we need to discuss. But this is phase one of a multi-phase plan, and what Gaza will look like, moving forward is not even on the table for that's going to be discussed in future phases, for example. So there's much to still figure out. You were alluding, though, to relationships and to, I think your term was intergenerational trauma, and what things look like. What's the impact been of this conflict on your relationships here at home in Manitoba with others?
It's impacted every relationship, I think. The impact that your identity has and how it intersects into every aspect of your life has really been poignant over the last couple of years. But, here in Manitoba, we grew up hearing our grandparents, as Jewish people, we grew up hearing our grandparents talk about the horrors of the Holocaust and World War II and their experiences of anti-Semitism and Canada's part in that and the way Canada reacted to that. So, we were told those stories and we often thought naively, we're lucky that won't happen to us. But the events of October 7th and the international reaction to that and dismissal of the Jewish experience and the Jewish trauma, I think has really honed in on us that, those aren't mutually exclusive. Our experiences are not innately different from that of our ancestors, and there's resilience in that and intergenerational power in that, but also trauma that we need to work through as a community.
What have your conversations been like with other we mentioned you're a student. I'm wondering with Palestinian students, and what do you hope those conversations might be like moving forward?
Those conversations have largely been led with humanity leading, with empathy leading, which is, I think, the only way we can lead these conversations. Obviously, this has been a time of tension, a time of suffering and trauma for both communities, and I think recognizing that is where we need to begin. And I really do hope moving forward we're able to recognize our shared humanity, our shared values. We're all Manitobans at the end of the day. So that doesn't negate our separate identities as being Israeli or Palestinian or Jewish, but that's something we can connect on. So I do hope that there's more opportunity to have not only a debate and discussion, but also discourse and really talk about the difficult things, but remembering that, we're all coming from the same place.
That is Emily Kalo, Israeli-born citizen living here in Winnipeg. She's a student at the University of Manitoba. So as I mentioned, right now, at this time, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal is on hold, but people here in Manitoba are still very helpful. When the announcement first came that this was happening and close, there was a lot of reaction. Let's go to Mona Zangana to find out how her community is feeling and reacting. Mona is a Palestinian student, also from the University of Manitoba. Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again.
So what were your initial thoughts and how are you feeling this morning as this is close?
I'm not very surprised that this deal is on hold. I've been keeping up with it and have been seeing reports not only, through CBC and Al Jazeera, but even through Israeli news reports that unfortunately citizens are scared that the government will be the ones to kind of ruin this deal and delay the hostages from coming home, as well as I've seen news reports from security cabinet and members from the Israeli government who are just completely opposed to a deal like this. And so I'm not very surprised, but I do hope that they can come to something right away as soon as possible for everybody to be safe, all the hostages to go home, and for Gaza to stop getting bombed, because even while they are talking about the ceasefire deal, they're actively bombing them there.
In the last hour, we were actually talking about that. I think there's been 80 deaths. How are you, when it comes to the details of the deal, what questions do you still have about it?
I still have questions on how many Palestinians will be released. I have questions on I think phase 2 and 3. I think we need to get more specifics into phase 2 and 3, and I don't think just giving us a little bit of details on phase 1 and saying, oh, yeah, we have more plans for Gaza in the future is good enough. They need to be working harder.
There have been, obviously, online right away over the last 24 hours, these photos online and video in the news of Palestinians celebrating in Gaza. How do those pictures sit with you?
You know what? It's really touching and heartwarming to see those pictures. I'm very happy for them that there's a chance that they could get a little bit of peace. And, it just shows how strong they are as a people, that even while they are actively being bombed, they still have that hope and faith, and they still have that in them to celebrate that they could finally feel safe. I do also think that they are the only ones who have the right to be celebrating. Everybody outside of Gaza and Palestine, there's nothing to celebrate. We have to keep doing our job and keep doing better. And there should have been more done to prevent all of this from happening in the first place. And just because there is a ceasefire and there is a hold on the bombardment in Gaza, it doesn't mean that Gaza or Palestine is free. There is much more work that needs to be done.
How are Palestinians in your community here in Winnipeg feeling, and what was the reaction? And tell me about your connections there locally to bring it to our community here.
Mm-hmm. So we all kind of feel the same. We won't believe it until we see it. We've seen deals before. Back in November there was a ceasefire deal that barely lasted until they started bombing Gaza again. So we're all just kind of on the same page where we'll believe it when we see it. And how long is this going to end? Because there's been a pattern even before October 7th, there's been a pattern of Israel bombing Gaza and whatever else they do in the West Bank, which is a completely different subject. So it's a pattern for us. And so...
we had a student on just now, another student who was an Israeli background student, talking about their relationships here, and her hope that moving forward there'll be a rebuilding. And she was also acknowledging intergenerational traumas, just to sort of bring it here home to Manitoba. Mm-hmm. What are your hopes moving forward on that front?
I kind of heard a little bit of what she said, and I do agree with her. For both Palestinians and Jewish people, it has been very tough. I hope that all the Jewish people do get their family members safe, and I do hope that there are no deaths, as well as I do hope that the Palestinians can finally live in peace and stop the bombardment. Both of them are going through tons of intergenerational trauma and post-traumatic stress, and I do hope that moving forward, specifically within the university, connections can be built and we can kind of come together and advocate for both of our communities in a secure and safe way.
That is Mona Zangana, a Palestinian student at the University of Manitoba. Well, at the start of the podcast, I mentioned that we would be digging into different things that are affecting Manitobans, and that they would be from different perspectives. So obviously we've just heard what these two young people are feeling about what's been developing in the Middle East. Next, let's find out what people are thinking about a number of things that are happening here in the city of Winnipeg. That is because every month in our CBC studio for the morning show, Mayor Scott Gillingham comes in and sits down and we talk about all kinds of things. For January, it was 6 different topics. We dig into all the details and leave a little bit of time for pushback, as you're about to hear in this month's conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
We're going to turn to news of the day and topics, but I want to give you a moment because you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about Nello Altamar this morning.
Yeah, the news of Nello's passing is just really devastating. It's a huge loss for our community. I was with Nello in September. He and I were at an event together. It was an event with students, and Marcy, it was quite remarkable to watch him just leave all the adults at the door and head right to the students. And I just watched. I thought, this man is like a fish in water in this classroom. And he stopped and talked to each of the students and asked how they were doing, checked on their work, really affirmed them and encouraged them. And I know today that a lot of people are mourning his loss. He was a great champion for education and really for building a better Transcona and a better Winnipeg, a better province. So on behalf of the people of Winnipeg, my sincere condolences to Nello's family, his friends, and to all his colleagues at the Manitoba Legislature.
Nello Altamar was just 61 years old, and news of his passing official yesterday. He, of course, had been the education minister at the provincial level. Let's move into the homeless strategy. So this was obviously announced this week. I know you were at the announcement. What's actually, though, the city's role in what's going to be happening out there?
Well, first of all, I'm very excited about the announcement. I've been calling for one coordinated plan to address homelessness people out of encampments into housing with wraparound supports. And so I commend Premier Canoe and Minister Smith for this announcement. And the city will be full participants and full partners in this work. The city's roles are several. Several of our departments will be involved in this plan. For example, our Public Works Department will be involved and water waste. Once it's time to clean up the encampments, we'll continue to have our bylaw officers involved as well when needs be, and we continue to work with our fire paramedic department, who often have to go into encampments to check on the health of individuals as well. So at every front, wherever the city is needed, I have told the Premier we'll be full participants and partners to really get a handle on getting people out of encampments into housing with the wraparound supports and getting those sites where the encampments are cleaned up so that they're back, usable to the public again, whether it's a riverbank or a park or a playground.
Because part of it is preventing new encampments from popping up
Yes.
once people have moved on into better housing. I want to ask you also about last time you were here. We talked about, I'm switching gears here on you fast, but proposed snow clearing pilot for next winter. A lot of Winnipeggers wrote into us about this one. This is where the city, you're saying that it's proposed you'll wait till 15 centimeters of snow fall on city streets before initiating a plowing operation. I understand there may be some news on this?
There is, and I can tell you, my office has had more emails and calls about the snow clearing pilot proposal than we have about the property tax increase. And so Winnipeggers are really want us to keep our snow clearing at the current standard, the current level. And so today, Councillor Janice Lukes, in her Public Works Committee meeting, will be bringing a motion to cancel the pilot project. We won't do the pilot project. I support her in that. We've heard from the residents of Winnipeg, so there will not be a pilot project that starts next fall.
And is that really just because of that response from Winnipeggers? Because when you were here and we talked about it, you said you thought this would be a good way to save money, that it wouldn't cause that much disruption. Is this just following what the public has said?
We've heard loud and clear from the public on this. Now, our Public Works Department, like all other departments, will continue to be responsible to find cost savings, to control costs as well, but there will not be a pilot project. And so Councillor Lukes will introduce a motion today at her committee. I support her in that.
I was going to say, where are you going to find the money now?
Well, there was really, we didn't put any, estimate any savings.
Potential.
Yeah, we didn't put
Okay.
any savings into, we didn't book
But
any
you
savings, is
estimated
what
you
I'm
have
trying to
savings,
say.
though.
We didn't book any savings into the budget for the pilot project because
Okay.
we didn't know what the outcome would be. And so there's no impact to our budget.
From snow to fire, obviously the Sutherland this morning is literally smoldering on Main Street. That building is being demolished currently. That stretch now of Main Street, vacant lots, we've had fires. We've had a record fire year, in fact, record number of fires in the city in 2024. How do you, or can you, how can the city make that stretch of Winnipeg, where we have a lot of vacancies and a lot of buildings that could deal, with development. A lot of people might be thinking that could be part of our housing plan moving forward. How can you make that more attractive to developers to move into those vacant spaces or vacant lots? Yeah,
I agree with you in that statement that all of those lots, all those vacant derelict buildings, they represent potential for housing at a time where we need housing. And the Sutherland was vacant at the time. So we are tackling vacant and derelict buildings. We have 700 of them in the city of Winnipeg. We have far too many vacant and derelict buildings. So what we're doing right now is we're pulled together a table of not only City of Winnipeg departments, Marcy, but we've got the private sector, the nonprofit sector at the table as well to try to solve this problem together. Often governments or levels of government will just try to address the issue on their own. What we're moving towards now is to say, look, we've got a lot of smart people with good ideas in the community, so let's bring people together. So, for example, Darrell Warren, of his neighborhood association in the North End, he's at the table. Folks from Build are at the table. We've got all of our departments at the table as well, trying to work on this issue of vacant and derelict buildings together to two things primarily: reduce the number of vacant and derelict buildings and get those sites redeveloped into housing.
What do you say to developers, though, who are going to say, I'm not going to go and fill the lot on the Sutherland that's going to be left there because, I'd rather build in another area of Winnipeg. How do you make that area more attractive, maybe?
Well, I think part of it is the
developers.
dialogue with the developers to say, what would it take for you to develop here? What can the city do and assist with to make it more attractive, this area more attractive for development?
Because so those conversations are happening now.
They are, and I really think all of these areas represent potential to transform a neighborhood.
Let's talk about a development that we actually haven't talked about in the morning show. It's been in the news a lot. And forgive me, listeners, but I have to set this up, and there's lots of detail. So Lemay Forest is where we're going to talk about here, what we're going to talk about. This is out in St. Norbert. So this is sort of the short notes here. There's a private developer trying to build and cut trees. There have been protest vehicles on city land blocking access at points. Now, Manitoba Historical Records is involved. They say there are likely unmarked graves in the forest because from 1904 to 1948, it was an orphanage. It was a home for unwed moms. Records show there's a mortality rate that was close to 60%. So that means between 1,200 and 2,300 children died in the building. So I'm raising all of this because one of the protesters has filed a legal action. They say the development violates the Cemeteries Act because of what I mentioned there. The developers filed for contempt, saying this is private land, I'm developing, get out of the way. Russ Wyatt now, city councillor, says he wants the city to expropriate the land and get involved. You, I know, Mayor Gillingham, oppose that. You're on record opposing this. Why do you oppose it, and what concerns do you have, if any, about this, what's developing around Lemay Forest?
Well, first of all, and I appreciate that you laid out all the different initiatives that are going on right now related to this property. And so I have been, and consistently, I'm working quietly behind the scenes. And one of the reasons I'm working quietly behind the scenes is that, and having conversations with all these different partners, is that there are several things from legal action being taken on this matter. It is private property. Private property owners do have rights. But, every time politicians will talk about this property, it seems that the value goes up. So when people talk about the idea of purchasing the property, a conservancy purchasing the property, or the idea of expropriation, I think we have to be very cautious and prudent and wise in dealing with this matter. And so there's a lot of, as I said, a lot of action, a lot of activities happening behind the scenes. There was also talk about the idea that perhaps the area is habitat for a certain pileated woodpecker, and that they nest
There's
there.
Environmental concerns and now the grave concerns.
So I'll continue to work behind the scenes to get a resolution to this matter. But right now there's a lot that's happening related to Lemay Forest.
I'm not hearing that you're firm though in saying we're not getting involved. Developer, go ahead and develop it because of all the moving parts with the wildlife and also with this potential for a Cemeteries Act challenge.
Yeah, I think two things. Property owners do have property rights, and I think we have to be careful. We do have to be careful on that as a city, Winnipeg. But second of all, there's legal action happening right now related to this matter, related to the property. So I think we need to see how that plays out as well.
I'm going to get you to put your headphones on actually here because I have a clip to play for you. The Premier was here last week and he said something about the city. Last time you were in, actually, we were talking about the funding cut to the Millennium Library Community Connection space. You mentioned that jurisdictionally those services should be run by the province. So the city was effectively pulling out. But this is what Premier Wapkinew said to this.
Cities across Canada provide services like that. So I think we really need everybody to step up here. But what we're doing as a province, we're building housing, and we're going to ensure that there's a wraparound services so that once people move into housing, they can actually be successful there.
Hang on, though. Are you going to fill that gap that they left? Because it sounds like you just said that's a civic responsibility.
We are doing a huge amount of heavy lifting when it comes to social services and when it comes to ensuring that we have housing stock in place. We've stepped up time and time again to ensure that we have outreach supports, that we have other supports.
How do you feel about the city shutting that space? Just as the last question.
Well, the city's making a lot of decisions, and I think they'll be held accountable for the decisions that they made by the people of Winnipeg.
So, Mayor Gillingham, I'm not here to pit the two of you against each other, but does that response prompt you to rethink the closure of the resource for the downtown population?
No, the Premier's right. The city will be held accountable. Province held accountable for its decisions. Federal government held accountable for its decisions as well. So I really don't take issue, with the Premier's comments. The city of Winnipeg is doing a lot, so more than I think we've certainly done in decades when it comes to addressing homelessness. As I said, we are full partners with the province in the plan to get people out of encampments into housing. We fund 24/7 safe spaces. We fund mobile outreach. We have low-income bus passes. We fund a public washroom. Winnipeg and Manitoba is different than other cities. Other cities have like across Canada, there are other cities. It's different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, where some cities have responsibility for social services. Many years ago, there was a partnership between the city and the province, where the province took on social responsibility, the social services responsibility, and the city kind of moved out of that jurisdiction. So we continue to be full partners, and I think that's the message I want to get across. We're working with the province. We'll continue to work with the province to help people, get out of encampments and into housing.
I want to ask you about what you raised there, though, 24/7 safe spaces and warming spaces, because, obviously in the last week, we also had the death in the ER, and we know at the time there were people there that were not there for medical reasons. We were told by HSC, the ER department, that they were there to warm up. We know this happens. Marion Willis was talking about St. Boniface Street Links, and they have the pilot project ongoing on St. Mary's Avenue right now, where people are being diverted and coming in. But everybody in the city is sort of screaming for more 24/7 warming spaces. What can the city do, and what is the city's role in opening more than what is already committed to?
Well, I think, first of all, we've funded, like the one you talk about with St. Boniface Street Links on St. Mary's. That's a City Winnipeg building that we've opened up for St. Boniface Street Links to use. So we fund 4 24/7 safe spaces right now. I think now with the new provincial plan, which will include a navigation center, I think that's going to be key as well. I'm really glad to see that Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud is in the lead role there. Her connections and her experience.
Are there more, though, in the budget, 24/7 safe spaces? Is that on the books in the plans?
No, there's no more in the budget right now. But again, we have a brand new plan from the province of Manitoba, which the city's going to be a partner in, which includes a navigation center. The goal is to get people out of encampments and not into temporary, 24/7 safe spaces and warming places.
That's going to take years. You know what I'm going to ask you. This morning, if someone's cold, it doesn't help them.
Yeah, it is going to take years. But again, we've expanded our funding to 24/7 safe spaces. With the opening of the navigation center, that's going to be critical as well. So the province has also accessed federal flex funding, which allows for investments, for example, in the Siloam's temporary winter shelter space as well. So we'll continue to be partners in what we do.
Just quick last, what will the navigation center, you've mentioned that a few times, so when is that likely to open, and how will that impact immediate shelter needs?
That's a question for Tessa Blakey-Whitecloud and the province, but my understanding is that navigation center will not only be a place for people to be warmed up, but also that would be the space where people can get the connections they need for all the services that are required. Okay, so that could be part of the answer. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. That is the mayor of the city of Winnipeg, Scott Gillingham. And this is Manitoba. If you liked what you heard, if you were engaged with what you heard, and we certainly hope you were, then please continue to like and share. And we'll talk to you again on another episode.